Hello, everyone, and welcome to Common Time Podcast, where we bring you world-class professional development for music educators straight to your phone. I'm David Klemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we are your hosts and fellow music educators. In each episode, we will interview a guest who is an expert in their field, here to provide us insight, strategies, and inspiration to help you elevate your ensemble. Our guest today is Kathy Johnson from Flower Mound, Texas. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, how are you guys today?
Great. So Kathy is a distinguished music educator, having led both junior high and high school programs in the state of Texas. Ensembles under her direction have performed twice at the prestigious Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, earned honor band distinctions with performances at the Texas Music Educators Association Conference, and as director of bands at Argyle High School, her programs earned 4 state marching band titles. Kathy now serves as an adjunct professor at the University of North Texas College of Music, and we are beyond excited to have her with us today to talk about mentoring and encouraging young teachers. So again, welcome, Kathy. John, why don't you get us started?
Hi, Kathy. I'm so happy to have you here. I truly believe that in the entire profession, you are a pillar of excellence. And so we're so happy that you're here.
So sweet. Thank you, John.
So, all right. So why don't we just dive in? What do you believe are the biggest challenges that specifically new teachers face in their first few years? And then secondly, how can mentors help them navigate those challenges?
Okay. Well, first of all, young teachers are a little self-conscious about what they do and how they do it because they've never taught. So they don't really know what they don't know. And to get them to even commit to having a mentor is a challenge because they're just so worried about what other people are thinking about them. They don't want to be thought of as inexperienced and not knowing what they're doing. But I just want to encourage any young teachers or even pre-teachers that are watching the podcast to reach out to your former directors or even colleagues, peers that you trust, and just, get them to listen to your bands and, watch you teach and not be afraid to take, to let yourself out there so that people can give you help. I think mainly due to that whole idea of the lack of daily teaching experience, I find that young teachers have trouble organizing the structure of lessons and being able to accurately apply their pedagogical knowledge that they got maybe at the university level or even in their own, school experience. I don't think that there's necessarily a magical fix for, anything that encompasses every situation, but mentors can help young educators by having a time during, their process where they can sit down and debrief them, having the mentor observe them, and then taking some time to talk through what just happened. What do you think? How do you think that rehearsal went? Well, why don't you think it went very well? Why were you unhappy with it? I think just talking it through with someone who's been there before really does help that young teacher realize the things that that they did and what they could have done differently and how they might approach it tomorrow. So taking that same lesson that they just did and maybe redoing it and starting, with that sort of same thing the next day.
That's so true. Mentorship is so important. I remember just thinking through my early days on people that had experience were every day influencing changes that I made on a daily basis.
Right.
Like even how kids entered a room. I'd never had that happen before.
Exactly.
What do you do with that?
Yeah, that's, at UNT, that's one of the things that, I included in, I was asked to come out there to restructure their methods classes. And so many of the things that we do every day in a public school, in a band setting, those teachers, those young college students, I guess, weren't really being exposed to. And it's, mostly because they were being taught by non-music educators. So I really enjoyed restructuring that. And I want to say that I have passed that torch on to Asa Burke. So he's now at UNT doing, taking over what I got started. And I'm really pleased with that whole program. But back to our young teachers and mentors, I think the young teachers don't always, think about the end. Where do I want my students to be at the end of this rehearsal or at the end of this week? or at the end of the 6 weeks or the end of the year. And so thinking in macro, micro increments and planning that way, I think is a big help too. And if mentors can kind of help those teachers structure a timeline, that's very beneficial.
So, in your experience, kind of taking that together, diving a little bit deeper, what are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen from new teachers, and how can mentors gently guide them through these learning moments?
I even, talk to my UNT students about this. The biggest thing, and student teachers, Teresa can vouch for this. Um, the first thing they do when they get up in front of a class or even in front of a rehearsal, let's say beginner class or rehearsal, full band rehearsal. Let's play this. Beautiful, beautiful. Stop. Okay, let's do that again. Beautiful, beautiful. Play, play, play. Stop. I think we should do that one more time. Play, play, play. So they don't really know they don't have an idea or concept of what they want to hear before they ask their students to play. So they're not giving any feedback that's going to be helpful to the students and make that next time around better. So I think that's the biggest thing. Having that sound in your ear, knowing exactly what you want to hear so that the first sound you hear, your ear is already thinking about, okay, that didn't happen, or this didn't happen. I need to, do this.
Right.
What I've told my student teachers and students at UNT, and that the UNT kids have to do a peer teaching segment each semester during their methods classes. And one of the things that I make them do, and I made Teresa do this too, you take a note card and you list 5 prioritized skills or concepts that you want to listen for as a teacher. And so you're listening to your group with these 5 things in mind. And we always start with the most basic things. Are they sitting in their chair right? Are they holding their instrument right? Are they breathing correctly? Those types of things first. So that when you stop them, you're mentally checking off 1, 2, 3. Oops, they didn't do 3. So that's where I'm going to start. That's the comment I'm going to make. And let's say you get through all 5 of those and that they're being consistent, they're consistently getting those things. Then you start a new card and do 5 more things. And those things, of course, would be higher level skills or, the next logical step musically. That's not to say you might not have to go back to card number 1 at some point, especially after a holiday break or something. But at least you have relevant things that you can talk to the students about to help them improve and to make them aware.
I have to say, I student taught with Cindy Lansford, and early on, we were in class, and I was up there doing, I forget what, I think it was clarinet class, and she turns to me, she's like, "So, do you have any feedback for the front row clarinets?" Well, I talked about articulation and embouchure and all the words that I've been hearing.
Dynamics or what?
Right, and then she's like, "Anything else you want to talk about?" So there was one player that had their hands backwards, and I didn't even notice it. And
They probably did it on purpose, right?
I don't remember. I mean, let's say that they did, just because,
Okay.
but I just remember going, how did I not even? And then afterwards, Cindy, in her expert mentorship, was talking about something similar. Like, first, are they sitting in the chair correctly? Are they holding their instrument? I mean, everything that you just said. So that one kind of resuscitated with me. I'm like,
Oh,
yep,
yeah.
I've been there.
Well,
But
timing has such a different meaning when you're as I tell the students this, when you're observing, let's say you're observing me teach the class, you can probably think of, oh gosh, why isn't she saying something about this? Why isn't she saying something about this? It's easy to observe and notice those things, but when you're the person that's in front of the group, time has a completely different meaning, and you kind of get blinders, only you get them on your ears. Does that make sense? Like,
yes, very much.
blinders. Yeah. So it makes it really difficult for young teachers, especially, to sort through all of the sounds they're hearing to get down to the most fundamental problem, because we can't build, on those other bigger problems until we take care of those simple fundamental problems.
True. And then the other side to the coin about all of the content specific elements of band. The other side to that, though, is classroom management.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
So, how can mentors help new teachers establish their classroom management style with the understanding that there are going to be struggles, there are going to be some things that could be a bit defeating? How do mentors help with that?
This may sound a little micromanagey, and and it is. Okay, I admit it, it is. And I, again, make the students at UNT do this. I created a script. Well, the reason I created a script, I guess I should go back with these young teachers. I always would let them know before they did their peer teaching, this is what my expectations are. I expect to see some results, and this is how this, I expect to see structure to your class. I expect to see sort of a timeline to your class. But I wasn't getting that. And it goes back to that whole idea of not that they can't do it, it's that when you're standing in front of a group, you freak out and everything just feels different. So I said, okay, how can I fix this? All right, I'm going to create a script. And if you want to pass this portion of the skill, you have to follow this script. Anything in red, you've got to say it. And all it is a good beginning. Welcome to class today. Remember yesterday we worked on blah, blah, blah. We're going to use that today to do this, this, and this. And then your middle, this is the new skill we're teaching. And all that we took yesterday's information and are working on this new skill. And then the end where we recap what we did today and we explain how we're going to use that tomorrow and how I want them to use it in their practice at home tonight. So creating, if young teachers can, have some sort of I say script, but just start using it, the first week. And then once you get really comfortable in front of your group, you kind of find your own voice and you're able to maintain that good structure and good educational timeline within a class period, and it becomes more natural to you. So the more times you say something, the easier it is, and then you can elaborate and go off maybe on little side, notes. But right at first, I think it's real important to have a set way that you do things. You start the class this way. You're going to say these words. You're going to do this in the middle. And at the end, with X number of minutes left at the end of the class, you're going to recap so that the kids can connect the dots. You have to help them, the students, young kids, connect the dots because they're not going to do that automatically. And the more structured I think that your approach is to the class, the better they understand and they realize that you're really helping them apply that knowledge that they just learned. Does that
Yeah, I
answer
am
that
kind of
question?
curious about the scaffolding elements. Like those of us that teach music education in a collegiate setting,
Hmm.
how specific are we really being in terms of preparing students to go and do this? Because it is not an innate skill, right?
No, it isn't. And I think we assume a lot
Mm,
because they've been in band for how many years? 12, 13, 14 years. Surely this is, second nature to them by now. It's not. It's not. And you really, I feel like that, in teaching whatever level, beginners through college level, that I do have to help them connect the dots. I use that term a lot, but it's really what we're
Right.
doing. And if we're not doing that, they're like, okay, I know this idea. She taught us this skill, and now we know this skill, and now we know it, and we have all these skills, but we have no idea how to apply them. So the application of
Absolutely.
knowledge is just super important.
indeed.
Yeah, that scaffolding is so important. I remember my first year to teach at colleges. I'm teaching colleges. At the college level, and speaking on a podcast, was at the University of Texas Arlington, and I was an interim, and they gave me a music education class, and I had to teach this. And I remember I came up with something kind of similar. I had an introduction, as I remember, introduction, review, new material, application, closure. And then I
Hmm.
brought those into, okay, here's what you do during introduction. Here's what you do.
Hmm.
Here's what you say. And if you do it out of order, we've messed up the sequence of how the students are going to learn. They're not going to apply because they forgot what they did before. But helping students do that. You mentioned a second ago that new teachers can be overwhelmed, and that can be stressful.
Hmm.
And you've been a director of bands. You've been in a position where you have had younger teachers under you, not only student teachers, but younger teachers coming into your programs, thinking from the mindset of the mentor teacher, not someone that's coming in, but it's there every day. How can those kinds of mentors assist our early career teachers in handling this emotional sort of weight and stress that often accompanies the first few years of teaching? And we've seen a lot of teachers kind of exit quickly. How do we
Mm.
help, as we're the director of bands, how do we help these young individuals that are coming in and immediately faced with the stresses of everyday life as a teacher?
Well, I think, as mentors and educators, teachers, professors, whatever, we do need to be transparent about, this life as a band director. It, we make it look easy at most of the time, I think. And it isn't. It isn't easy, and it's something where you have to be very organized with your time and be very deliberate about, this is the time I'm going to arrive, this is the time I'm going to leave, and I'm going to leave it at school when I go home. So
Hmm.
I think it's important, especially at the collegiate level. Let's say I would usually give a little lecture to the um, free student teacher class. So that's a different professor that teaches that class. But I would come in and do a little lecture on preparing for student teaching and being ready for that. So I talked to them about, you're living in a collegiate world right now, and it is its own world.
Hmm.
It's its own bubble. You're in this bubble. When you leave this bubble, you will have to fend for yourself. You're going to have to manage your time so that your school time is school time. You can't leave to go to a doctor's appointment or to get your car inspected. And I have a story about that. And get your tires changed or, whatever. You've got to, plan ahead. And so mentoring your young teachers or pre-teachers and, explaining to them, you know, take care of yourself. You're not going to be able to stay out till 2 o'clock in the morning and then get up and go to school the next day. You just won't be an effective teacher. So let's talk about, how you're going to manage that. There are going to be nights that you're going to be able to do those things you did in college, but it's not going to be on a daily basis. So get plenty of sleep. Get Take care of yourself, eat properly. Make sure that you have all of your car maintenance and your personal, physical, medical maintenance sort of taken care of, as best you can. Of course, things come up, but as best you can before you delve into this. There are going to be tears. There's going to be anxiety, there's going to be tears. And then, as a mentor teacher, when this happens, to student teachers or whatever, we sit down and we go, okay, so tell me how you're feeling right now. All right, what do you think precipitated this? What made this happen? Could could you have done something differently? Could I have done something differently for you? So we see how we got there, and then we can think, okay, let's in the future, let's not get to that point again. And I mean, even seasoned teachers go through stuff like that. It's just a matter of prioritizing and organizing.
It is. And I mean, it's tough, right? And it's okay for anybody listening to feel the stress of this. Like we all have it. I mean, and if people don't, I don't know that they maybe don't recognize it or aren't acknowledging it, but it's okay. We've all been through it.
Right. And I think, as a mentor, you've got to watch. It's like see something, say something thing. If
Hmm.
you see your young teacher or student teacher struggling, and you can, if you're aware at all, if you're paying attention at all, you can see signs of stress and anxiety before the explosion, right? So,
Yeah.
definitely try to head it off at the pass as well. My story about getting cars inspected. I was a first or second year teacher, and I couldn't get my car inspected because my hours were longer than the car dealership or wherever that I had to get my car inspected at the time. So it was one of those things where I just had to, I got to leave school early today and get this done. So it happens to all of us.
It does indeed. So, I mean, we just talked about this a bit, but perhaps we can put it into a bit more narrow of a focus. Trying to find the balance between professional life and personal a life well-being is extremely complicated to figure out,
Mhm.
right? And I still struggle with this. Michael Haycock here at Michigan, when I was teaching with him, he's the most organized human I've ever known.
Mhm.
And we were having a meeting and he asked how I was doing. I said, well, I'm struggling with having to balance all this stuff. I just feel like I'm working 24 hours a day. I don't want to let the students down. I don't want to let, the whole thing down. He said, stop. Here's what I would suggest. And he pulls out his planner, and his
Mhm.
planner is like 6 minutes on this,
Mhm.
12.7 minutes on. I mean, it's remarkable how organized
To
it is,
that point.
but you sort of have to do that, right? So,
Mhm.
just from your own experience, do you have any advice about how to kind of navigate those elements?
Well, I think it's hard. It's hard for all of us. I think I'm a workaholic at heart. I just don't like leaving things on my desk. When I come home, I want to be home. I don't want to think about school or work or what's left on my desk. But I've come to find out that there's always going to be something left on your desk. And what you have to do is, like Michael does, you have to organize and plan. If that means getting your lesson plans, done a month at a time, so that's one thing that's off your mind because you have to turn those into your administrator, right? So you've got their set, but then you've got your actual educational set that you use that non-musicians don't really understand, right? So getting those things done, I think making sure that you have hobbies, making sure that you plan trips or vacations or whatever. If you don't plan them, you're not going to take them. I was, I'm married. My husband and I have been married for a long time. I should know this, but it's a long time. We have two kids. When they were little bitty, I took about 4 years off, but then I started going back into the classroom and being able to manage my family life and my school life. I had to really do some soul searching and thinking to get away from that school so I could be home with my boys. And of course, I had my husband who was a great helpmate in that area. So he took on a lot of maybe non-traditional responsibilities for male, but having that helpmate really does help too. For those people that are single, I just say, like I said, plan and set aside time to go for a walk, to you know, do things with your friends. Don't let your friends go by the wayside. Make sure you nurture those friendships because you definitely need that.
Absolutely. I think you didn't say it exactly this way, but I think we have to be intentional about
Yes.
setting aside time for ourselves. And I didn't do
Hmm.
that when I was a young teacher either. And I look back like I wish I had. And even now, as John mentioned, there's times where I have to be like, what am I doing for myself today? When's the last time I did this one activity for myself? It was a week ago.
Hmm.
Well, that's too long. And
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be long periods of time. It could be a 15-minute walk. It could be just
Yeah.
it could be a 10-minute call to a friend you haven't talked to in a long time, but just
Hmm.
something that takes you away from the focus of, I have to do this one thing right now on my desk.
I think everybody has to go through one burnout year to really understand it. And let's face it, a burned out teacher is not one that's fun to be around and they're not very productive,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. So, speaking of, just young teachers continuing this discussion, feedback is such an important aspect. And all the things we're talking about are things that we can give back to teachers that are up and coming. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on the role of feedback, for new teachers, and how can mentor teachers provide constructive criticism without being discouraging? Because sometimes that communication toward a young teacher is, here are the things that we're seeing that aren't right, and it's just placing more stress on the person rather than lifting them up. How do we balance that as a mentor teacher looking at someone that's struggling?
Well, I hope that I did a good job of this. I think that I did, but sometimes our perception of what we do and what the reality is not the same. I believe that anything that is watched and measured improves. If you watch it and you measure it, it's going to get better. If you address it. I like with my own personal, like high school students, elementary, middle school students, and even collegiate students. I would prefer that that they tell me what it is they think went wrong. Or, I start the conversation out by saying, okay, so how do you feel about your teaching segment? Okay,
Mm.
good. Yeah, I agree. Yes. Okay, so what would you do differently? Why do you think you should do that differently? I think it's just leading questions, for them, and rather than pointing out specific things to them, I think letting them be the ones to come to that realization. Students learn better if they are the ones, you know,
Right.
recognizing it rather than being told all the time. So I think that's the best way to handle it. And, that's again goes back to that whole debriefing that I used to do with my student teachers. We try to do a debriefing session every day so that they could, you know, we could talk about how they did, but then
Right.
we could also talk about, well, what did you observe, with in my classes or in some other teachers' classes? What did you
Right.
think about? Was it successful? Would that have been something that you would have tried? That sort of
Mm.
thing.
You
How could
mentioned
you use that in the future?
Yeah, you mentioned debrief. It jogged my memory when I was in my doctorate with Steve Davis, and I think he might have actually gotten this from Michael Haythcock. We would have DOB 101 meetings.
Oh,
Here's an
yes,
event that
that's
happened today,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
we're going to talk through that for kind of our mutual learning. But even
Mm-hmm.
before that, in my first year to teach, I was lucky to teach with an individual that we had debrief meetings, and they weren't for him; they were absolutely for me and another colleague we were both first year teachers, and we didn't know what we didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a pretty good trumpet player, and I studied with John Haney at North Texas, and I had a really good idea of what I wanted to teach and how I wanted to teach it. And John Haney was an incredible mentor in structuring even my lessons. I can go back and think about exactly how a lesson was structured and why he structured it that way so that I could get better.
I've heard
Walking in,
that from everybody that studied with him.
he's just a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic human. I miss him still.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking about first year teachers, there was stuff I didn't know what to do. And I remember a conversation, a debrief, I will call it, with the director of bands my first year to teach. And it was about classroom management and what you're going to need to do for your classroom to run efficiently. And the classroom will be set this way. The stands look this way. If anything needs to be
Mm-hmm.
hands out on their chair. When the bell rings, you're at the front, at the podium, waiting for them to enter the room. And when they enter the room, you make eye contact with them to let them know that class has begun. Go
Mm-hmm.
get your instrument, have a seat. We had announcements during the first 10 minutes of my every day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at first the kids were like talking, and he shut that down. Like, nope,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to do that. Without that debrief, that behavior would have continued for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. And my ability to actually have a productive rehearsal after that 10 minutes of announcements would have been shot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh
that
yeah.
mentor teacher just bringing us in, he wasn't mean about it, but saying like, here's what you have to do. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what the expectation is. And you will see a noticeable change immediately.
Well,
And
and
like
that
literally
was a
2 days later,
totally
fixed.
different
Mhm.
group when you're coming into the room. And I, you had a question earlier about classroom management, and I talked about the script. Well, I didn't really, I guess, connect those for you. Having that structured lesson
Mm.
is going to help with classroom management. Your students are going to be playing their instruments more, talking less. You're going to be talking less. They're going to be playing the majority of the time. And like you said, having that culture of coming into the room quietly, being in your seat by a certain time. If they're older kids, maybe having specific things that they're allowed to warm up on their own while you're moving around the classroom and kind of keeping ears open for, ways you can, encourage them to do something differently, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would also encourage, and how I start every debrief, I don't call it that, but it's the
Hmm.
same thing. Here with my undergraduate music education students, I always ask them the first question: what went well?
Yes. Hmm. Always start with positives.
Have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they will give you 18 reasons why it was the worst lesson in the history of education, right?
It's the nature of what we do.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we all are that way, and it's something that you have to be super conscious about and really make yourself start with the positives. We assume everybody knows the positives, and not everybody does. And I can tell you this: students in a classroom, whether they're beginners or college students, they're always going to hear the things that need to be improved. Even if you do start out with, you know what, I really like the way you guys did this today, they won't remember that. They'll just remember, oh, she didn't really like the way we did this, this, and this, you know. So
It's true.
I always try to make a point. Did you hear what I just said? What did I just say? You know, put it into your own words. Tell me what I just said. Oh, yeah, it was a good thing, right? So, you know, it's just the nature of what we do.
Yeah.
Indeed. And speaking about being able to effectively communicate, how can experienced teachers guide younger teachers in developing those skills with administrators and colleagues and even parents?
You know, this was the thing that scared me the most as a young teacher. I was so afraid to have a parent conference or even to go into my principal's office and talk about whatever until I came to the realization that, you know, this is a partnership. What I'm doing, my principal hired me for because I'm the expert at this. He hired me for my knowledge, for my you know, advocacy of my program. He wants me there so that this program thrives. Okay, so there, that took a lot of pressure off. um, Parents, we're there together to make sure that we partner to make sure their child, you know, is getting what they need to get from me, from the other teachers, their other subjects. How can we work together to make this, you know, whatever the situation is, better? So once I started thinking of it that way, and I think if mentors can, you know, approach it that way, it certainly makes you feel calmer about it.
Mm.
As a first year teacher, a lot of times you're pretty close in age to the parents. If you've got beginners, you're not that far apart in age, but it seems like that you are because they have children and you don't. And I almost felt like it was, you know, like if I were getting scolded by my own parent or something, you know. So once I figured it out, you know, I'm here because I want to partner with you. I want to, you know, make sure that your child gets what they need. It was great. I think it's important too that young teachers follow a chain of command. Let's say you're, you know, the third director or fourth director, you know, you go to the people above you or who may have had more experience to ask questions about how should I handle this, and not just go off before you find out what's appropriate and what might or might not get you in trouble if you said it, because a lot of times as younger people tend to think, speak before they think. So
Yeah.
I think that's important too.
I love that you use the term partnership. I think that's such a fantastic word to describe almost maybe every relationship we're building in music education, whether it's with our students or colleagues or administrators or parents. It's all one big partnership. I've
It
never heard it really
is.
described that way, but that is absolutely beautiful.
Mhm. Well, I think too that whenever I'm trying to make decisions, whether it's, and this is sometimes things I have to tell the parent too, when I'm thinking about making decisions for your child, my first question to myself is this what's best for for this student, for this child? If my answer is a resounding yes, absolutely, then I'm doing the right thing. If the answer to that question is, well, it kind of benefits you more than it does the child, then that is the wrong answer. You know, so I always use that as my benchmark, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
too, because sometimes we just kind of, you know, get out of our focus being child centered sometimes. If
Mm,
all these other things are going on, you just have to bring that focus back in to being child
mm.
centered.
Yeah. Well, we've mentioned helping young teachers with, classroom management and scaffolding and a lot of different things.
Hmm.
How can mentor teachers help the young teachers celebrate their successes? Because sometimes the struggle overweighs them even recognizing that there's something successful going on. So how can we as mentors give them that, help them celebrate?
Well, I think nowadays, more so than when I was younger and starting out, we are getting to the point where we're not looking for those accolades like trophies and medals and things like that. that's a less important thing, and it's kind of like a byproduct of doing your job, of doing good work. If you're planning and you have these specific things in your plan, and you're checking those 5 points off, each of those 5 points on that note card is a success. And you should be glad and happy that now you can build upon that. And what you're about to build is going to have a good, strong, solid foundation. Just, keeping those young students or teachers thinking about those types of
Mm-hmm.
things, and that it's the little successes. You're never going to be able to play music for Prague if you can't play long tones and have good direction of air and breathe properly, and all of those things. So it's all relative, I guess, to where students
Yeah.
are at any given moment. But definitely all of these small successes come
Yeah.
together in the end to create students who are confident and can make musical decisions. And I think when you are in front of your group, let's say, or beginner class even, and you hear a phrase, or you hear them approach something and then come away from it really pretty, and they're listening for color groups and they're balancing and all of this. When you hear that happen, you get goosebumps. And then I when it happens to me, I always stop my group and say, "What did I just hear?" And if they can tell me the same thing that I just heard, I know I am like celebrating that day for sure. And many times the students are experiencing the same things that I'm experiencing, because we are trying to make it a more collaborative sort of environment where we're all experiencing the same things and we're hearing the same things at the same time. So those types of things, listen, watch your students, look at their reactions, get your head out of the score, pay attention to how they're, experiencing the music or whatever it is you're doing. I just think we just all need to be reminded of those things. Just don't take them for granted, for sure.
Indeed. And also too, those of us that are listening who are mentors or experienced teachers, it's important for us to recognize and acknowledge that it's a difficult job being an effective mentor. And
Yeah, it
it's a
is.
huge responsibility. I mean, something
Hmm.
that I take extremely seriously for the
Hmm.
students that I mentor.
Yeah.
So, speaking of that, do you have any advice to give to specifically people who are actively mentoring or soon to be, about how to help their new teacher colleagues how to not only survive their first few years but also grow into confident educators in the future?
Well, I think those of us who've been there, we all know that everything we do that first year is like, okay, I need to remember not to do that next year, or that really worked. I want to make sure I remember to do that next year. Keeping some sort of a journal of, these are the things that worked, these are the things that didn't, because your second year of teaching is going to be so completely different. I know I remember approaching my second year with just, I was anxious and excited to do it because I learned so many things from my mistakes that I made my first year. So just, know that, keep track of those things, and know that your second year is going to start out so different. And even that second year, you're going to, do some more things, and your students are gonna go further than they did the first year. And then you're gonna be able to apply that again to the third year. Just keeping that idea in mind and knowing that every year you're going to have some, and even still, as old as I am, I get inspired by young teachers. I get inspired by my college students. I get inspired by, books that other people have written and such. So yeah, just keep learning.
And it's also important to recognize here too that it's okay for those people who are mentoring to make mistakes. We will.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's a part of
Hmm.
it, and it's difficult, but it's such important work.
Well, and I think that it'd be silly to say, that the mentors aren't learning too. They
Amen.
are still learning, and they may be learning some things from the mentees. I tell my student teachers, I expect to learn something from you. I expect you to give me something that I can use. And I think I've learned something from every student teacher that I've had, I've tried to find something that they do so well that I take and I'm going to make it mine. I'm going to use this so that, it's a give and take. Mhm.
Kathy, this has been such wonderful information. I have grown today. You just talked about learning, and I've learned new information today from you. I'm thankful for. You just mentioned books, and we're kind of wrapping things up. We ask 2 questions of everyone on the podcast, and the first one is there a book or books that have particularly inspired you in your journey as a musician or a music educator that you could share with us? And we're just kind of cataloging because, for a lot of us that it's just another resource to go listen to, but now we have a book we can go read that's really been meaningful to,
Okay.
our
Well,
folks.
this is a more recent book, and especially for the topic we have today with mentoring and young teachers. The book is called Beyond the Notes by Paula Kreider.
Mhm.
The first chapter, if the first year teacher can just even read that first chapter, there are bullet points. The way the book is written, it's like a conversation that she's having with you, as like I can hear her voice when I'm reading. And it's her experiences, of course, what she's learned, what she might not do again, what she definitely did do again, those types of things. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is great, as I just recommended it to one of our student teachers in Denton. It's super good. And I'm hoping that you guys have talked to her about coming on the podcast.
She is on our list for sure.
Yay.
For sure. Yeah,
Okay.
she's fabulous.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah.
So then, Kathy, just to kind of wrap things up,
Mhm.
what is your favorite time signature?
Okay. I saw that you asked that question to others, and I didn't even have to think about it. My favorite time signature, I'm a lyrical girl. I love lyrical music, and I love teaching it. And so my favorite time signature is 3/4 time.
Okay.
It lends itself to, shaping and direction, like leading, across the bar and between the counts. And it can be, smooth and lyrical, but it also could be, fast and furious if you're taking it in one. So it's very versatile.
It is
Although
versatile.
common time is very good
We
too.
appreciate
I
you.
really do like my 3/4.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
since you mentioned common time, we'll give you credit. Obviously, we're excited, so excited to have had you on today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm ready to get this one out. I wish we could publish it tomorrow because just so much good information. So
Yeah.
thank you again, Kathy. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time.
Thank you guys for having me. I love talking about band and about, especially, all of the mistakes that I made that I learned from, and just being able to pass that on to other people. It's
Yeah,
it's
it's
awesome.
kind of the idea of mentor and mentorship and being a
Mhm.
mentee, a lifelong mentee in a way. So what a great conversation. Thank you again. And until the next time, we really do
All
appreciate
right. Thank you
it. All right.
guys.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye-bye.
Okay, everyone, that's a wrap for this episode of Common Time Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insights and inspiration to take back to your ensemble. New episodes of Common Time Podcast drop every Monday. We hope you enjoy the show. Please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more music educators just like you. And a special thanks to our wives, Jessica and Teresa, for keeping us organized enough to make this happen. Also, don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Common Time Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Keep making music and keep making a difference.